To take Henry's mind off of everything, him and Jimmy go do a job in Tampa where they try to feed a guy to the tigers and rough him up.
Such a great scene.
And this is an important scene because it leads to both of theirs arrest for this crime, because the sister of the guy that they threatened to feed to the tigers was like a secretary at FBI, and she told them everything. And even the brother got arrested and went to jail.
Yeah.
And obviously Jimmy and Henry go to prison at different areas.
They serve different prisons. Yeah.
And Henry has the great time to serve with Paulie and everything. We have those great scenes of them cooking dinner and stuff.
Yeah, prison for mobsters is like not even that bad. Like there's that scene where they're preparing dinner and he pulls out lobsters out of a box filled with ice, and they're drinking wine. And so like being a mafia guy, being a wise guy in prison, you kind of still get to you're in prison, but you get to enjoy it. You get to eat well. You get to have anything brought into the prison that you want. And it's not that bad.
Yeah, they run the place. In prison, this is where we'll dive back to Henry for a second. This is where Henry gets a taste for the lucrative profits of drug dealing. And drugs are what eventually leads to the downfall of several of the main characters in this film, as well as Paulie Cicero, who didn't even want anything to do with it. And this is something that majorly doomed a lot of mafia families in general, too, was going to the drug industry. But when Henry gets out of prison, Paulie tells him, I understand what you did in jail with the drugs, but I don't want anything to do with it. No drugs at all. But obviously, Henry, he just got out of jail. He's got a family to feed. He's got to get them out of an apartment. So he ropes Jimmy and Tommy into his new drug enterprise, which were like the new scam, very lucrative, but also very high risk. And Paulie doesn't want anything to do with it because it jeopardizes the entire family if they're drugs related.
This actually is a critical part of the Godfather film, where Don Corleone doesn't want his family doing anything with drugs, and then he rejects the offer from that other mobster to partner up in the drug business, and that leads to his assassination attempt on Don Corleone's life. So the Italian mob, there were people who had different perspectives on drugs. A lot of the older traditional guys didn't want anything to do with it because they knew it was a high risk. Being pinched was a very easy thing. So the older guys didn't want anything to do with it, but then the younger blood, they wanted to make as much money as they could, and they saw that drugs were the easiest way to make this money. And I'll do that.
After Henry and Jimmy get out of prison, Jimmy orchestrates this brilliant heist. I think it was the most lucrative robbery in American history. Yeah. I think it might still be.
Yeah, it might still be.
They stole $5.8 million from an airport. I think it was called the Lusfana job or the Lusfana robbery.
And it doesn't sound like a lot right now, but for inflation, this is the 60s, so if you inflate it, that's like $30 million.
And so he pulls it off, and there's that awesome scene of Henry Hill in the shower listening to the news report of it. He's like, Jimmy, you did it! You motherfuckers, Jimmy! And it's hilarious, and it's super fun. And then the next shot is them celebrating at that restaurant. It's Christmas time.
Yeah.
There's a Christmas song playing. Rudolph's playing at the bar.
No, Frosty the Snowman.
Oh, Frosty the Snowman's playing at the bar. But also we get another sense of Jimmy's ruthlessness, where all his crew members on the job are coming in with, one of them's got fur coats on, one of them shows up with a brand new Cadillac, and Jimmy specifically told them not to spend any of the money, no lavish expenses, because he didn't want to draw attention to themselves. And this is what leads to Jimmy in that epic scene, this montage of all these mobsters, and like even some of the mobsters' wives are getting hit. Some people are found in garbage trucks, some people are found shot in the head in their cars.
Yeah.
And it's because Jimmy, not only does he want to selfishly keep all the money for himself, he's also protecting himself from getting pinched.
He became extremely paranoid and lost control of himself, and he ended up believing that nobody could be trusted.
And that paranoia also seeps into Henry and Karen later on throughout the film.
And it gets to the point where Henry and Karen are so terrified of Jimmy that they think he's going to kill them as well. And it leads to that amazing scene where Karen went to see Jimmy to talk to him at his warehouse. And then after they have their conversation, Jimmy tells her, hey, I got some new coats out back. Go check them out. Take as many as you want. And then there's that great scene where Karen goes outside of the warehouse, and she needs to go like probably like 100 feet further to enter the area where the coats are. And then she takes a few steps, and then it's like the dark alley, and she gets terrified. And then she looks back, and then Jimmy's standing in the doorway. He's like, yep, back there. Just go back there. And she's like, back there. And he's like, yep, right back there. And she gets so terrified and paranoid that she ends up taking off and running away because she thinks she's going to get killed right there in that moment.
I know. I love that scene because you feel the paranoia too. And at
Yeah.
this time, this is when Henry and Karen are really getting into the drugs and they're starting to get attention from the feds.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was involved with the drugs, and he doesn't want Paulie to find out that he was involved with the drugs because if Paulie finds out that Jimmy was involved with the drugs, Jimmy's probably going to get taken out because Paulie wants nothing to do with the drugs.
Yeah.
So is Jimmy trying to take out Karen and Henry to save himself because they're the only two people who can tie him to the drug ring?
Yeah, I think Jimmy Conway is interested in self-preservation.
Yeah, but personally, I don't think Jimmy was going to have Karen killed right here or have Henry killed, because if Jimmy Conway wanted to kill them, he would have killed them. And he showed that with his ability to just kill people with no remorse plenty of times already. And I don't think that he was going to kill Karen.
I think that Jimmy was planning to kill both of them. And then there's that diner scene with Jimmy and Henry, and throughout the conversation, Henry realizes that Jimmy's probably going to kill them, and Scorsese does that great dolly zoom shot, the famous one from Jaws. He does the same thing in this diner where they pull out and they track away from the table while they're zooming in with the lens, so it crushes the background and expands it. And that's a moment where Henry finally understands that he's going to get killed by Jimmy if he doesn't do something soon.
Yeah, maybe, probably, but also
which is why he ends up ratting on him.
But you also have to factor in the paranoia.
Yeah.
But then, the paranoia of Henry Hill and his wife Karen. We have to rat on these people or else we're going to get killed. Henry and Karen are making a ton of money. They seem to be kind of like on top of the world again. They have a brand new house. They have Maury over, and they show him like the wall that opens up to the TV. So they have all this cash again, and it seems like everything's going to go great. But eventually they start attracting attention to themselves, and they develop drug problems themselves. They're addicted to cocaine, and the feds start to come on to them. And obviously there's that great sequence,
the helicopter sequence,
where it's like a day in the life of Henry Hill that Scorsese takes you on, and it's just a paranoia trip-filled adventure of I'm going to get pinched and I'm scared shitless.
Yeah, and it's basically him and Karen running errands, like trying to sell guns to Jimmy, trying to pick some drugs up, him going to get new mixes of cocaine from Sandy. And all the while, his brother is stirring the sauce the whole time back at home.
He's making the chicken cutlets too. That's the best way to make chicken cutlets.
So Henry's juggling all this shit in this one day, and then throughout the entire film, Scorsese films it with long takes, very slow-paced filmmaking to really bring you into the moments. But with this entire sequence, very fast cuts. The editing is whip fast, and it makes you feel paranoid, just like him and Karen. And they're constantly like looking up at the sky at the helicopter, and you're like, "Is that helicopter following us? I feel like it's following me everywhere."
Yeah, and also like the music we have. I think he's playing like the Rolling Stones, Monkey Man. Like,
there's a few songs. Yeah, so it's very very high beat music, very heavy drums the whole time, and so he makes you feel like exactly how Henry's feeling, like kind of paranoid, high strung, and bewildered. And
he's also dealing with his runner. So he has this plane runner who runs drugs on flights, and she uses a baby as cover and with a diaper bag, and that's how she smuggles the drugs on planes across cities. And her inability, after Henry asks her to use a different phone than the house phone, she uses the house phone, which eventually leads to his arrest at the end of that day when he's in the car in the driveway. Then all the feds pull up on him, and that's when Henry gets pinched for real.
And he says, as soon as I heard the guy talking, I knew it wasn't a gangster, because the gangster would have killed him without saying anything.
Yeah.
So let's sidetrack to Karen for a bit, because she's involved with Henry's drug ring, but her transformation as a character is pretty fascinating, because she starts out just as like a normal woman and then gets thrown into this mob life, but she was just as intoxicated as Henry with the mob life, because she puts up with his infidelity, she puts up with his verbal abuse and physical abuse, because just like him, she loves this lifestyle.
It's very much like Camilla in The Sopranos, big time. So Karen is played by Lorraine Bracco, who also had a major role in The Sopranos. She plays Tony's therapist, one of the top billed actors in that show. And there's obviously a very male-heavy cast, and Karen's role was very important for that reason. They had to get it right, and in order to make Karen stand out as an integral character to the film, Lorraine Bracco brought so much energy and charisma to Karen, and she's one of the best parts of the movies. And Karen was born into a nice Jewish family, no mafia ties, and for quite some time in their relationship, Karen has no idea what Henry does before they're married. He lies to her, tells her he's a union delegate. And it's not really until after Henry, which you talked about earlier, when he beats the neighbor in the face with the handgun and he gives her the gun to hide, that's when she realizes who this man is and what she's gotten herself into. And she's turned on by it, and she's enthralled by the lifestyle. Just like the lifestyle seduced Henry, it seduced Karen as well. She's seduced by the cash, the connections, the no rules, being able to do whatever you want. And the ultimate seduction in this film that Scorsese used to show this of both parties is that infamous Copacabana long take.
And so this iconic Steadicam long take where they go through the bottom floor of the Copacabana, through the kitchen, through the hallways, and we see that Henry is so connected that he can get into the most popular club in America through the back door, and then they when they enter the restaurant, they grab a table and carry it through the restaurant and put a table down for him. So they make a table just for Henry.
Not just a table, they put it front center in front of the performance.
And right when they sit down, someone already bought them champagne.
Yeah, and the production actually didn't get permission to shoot through the front of the restaurant for this scene, and they were forced to go in the back. So Scorsese had to kind of think on his feet, and being the genius that he is, he came up with this iconic, probably the most iconic long take in film history. And the thing with this scene, like we said, it's the ultimate form of seduction for this date with Karen, but also the lifestyle of being a gangster with all those perks and knowing everybody, getting the tables made without a reservation, getting the bottle of champagne sent to you, like you just said. That's also seduction for Henry.
And also, this is a contrast to their first date. So on the first date, Henry was being a wingman for Tommy because Tommy was trying to sleep with this Jewish girl. Jew broads, prejudice against Italian.
In this day and age.
Can you believe it? And so he was being a reluctant wingman, and Karen was the other woman at the date for the double date.
He had to meet Tootie.
Yeah, and then he had no interest in Karen at all. And then on the second date, he stood her up. He didn't even show up for the second double date. And then Tommy's like eating food. He's like, I don't know what happened. He said he really liked you. But then Karen makes Tommy find Henry, and she just calls him out in front of all his guys. And then she's showing a lot of power and strength in this moment. And that's when Henry finally becomes attracted to her. He wasn't attracted to her at first because she's like just this nice Jewish girl who has nothing to do with the mob, and she just doesn't seem very interesting. But then when she shows her true side to Henry in that moment, he's completely enthralled by her. And that's what draws him to her.
And so throughout the film, Karen goes through, like you said, this crazy transformation similar to Henry. She gets involved with the drugs. She gets involved with the drug ring. Despite throughout the beginning of the film, she's just part of the family. She's trying to do the mob housewife thing with all the other mob housewives, because the thing with being in the mob, those are the only people you can interact with. And she doesn't really like the other mob wives. And she goes to that beauty day where they're all putting that blue facial stuff on their faces.
Yeah, they have crazy hair and makeup and
they
nails.
use cheap makeup and they talk about how they beat their kids. And she seems the most normal out of all of them and maybe the most anti-mob wife of them all, until she starts getting in with the drugs and she starts becoming addicted to that lifestyle with the money and everything.
Yeah, she says she doesn't want to be like them, but she ends up being just like them because when she's first introduced to that group of women, she learns that these women put up with their men for their bad behavior, they're always cheating on them and they're always assholes, and because they're gangsters. And then she's like, I'll never be like that. Our marriage will never be like that. But she ends up putting up with a lot of shit from Henry, and she ends up becoming just like them.
And there's that great scene where Henry's in jail and Karen's visiting and she can't take it anymore and no one's helping her out. Paulie's not helping her out. And she's just pulling all this stuff out of her bag.
She pulls salami out of her.
She pulls out a loaf of bread out of her shirt and her jacket. She's got the baby crying. And it's just ridiculous. And then obviously the guard is paying no attention to it.
Yeah.
And it's just you can see the emotional wreck that she's becoming throughout the film because of everything that Henry's doing to her and all the abuse she's taking physically, emotionally, verbally. And it seems like it's a very tough life.
It's taking a toll on her, and obviously she chose a path in life that could lead to destruction, and it is ruining them.
And again, this is very similar to, if you know about Sopranos, if you've seen it, it's very similar to Camillo and Sopranos, where Camilla's a devout Catholic. She's a very good person, and she's constantly coping with the fact that her husband does terrible things, leads a terrible life, but she's addicted to the lifestyle, addicted to the money, addicted to the no rules, doing whatever you want, anytime you want. So Henry and Karen are basically forced to go into the witness protection program after the paranoia of there being a hit out on the both of them from Jimmy or Paulie. And like we said earlier, Henry does what Jimmy told him never to do. He's going to rat on his friends. And Henry gives up everybody to the feds. They clean up shop. And those courthouse scenes are hard to watch because you've really grown to really love these characters. And you're witnessing a man betray all of his friends. He betrays Jimmy. Even Paulie gets pinched for this, even though he had nothing to do with the drugs. So you kind of feel bad for Paulie.
Yeah, and Paulie had always been so careful in his entire life, never using phones and never getting involved in drugs.
Yeah, and the thing with Paulie, he was like once a god to him. And Paulie, he's a criminal, yes, and he's in the mob, but he's kind of like a good guy in a sense. You know, he's like a protector of that community. He's in charge of that community. He makes sure that there isn't lawlessness between the mob, and he's kind of like they said earlier on in the film that like he's like the police force of the mob. That's what the cops don't understand. They need people like Paulie to run everything.
And then there's that heartbreaking scene when Henry goes to Paulie begging him for help. And then all Paulie does is he gives him the cash he has in his pocket, and he says, "I have to turn my back on you now." Yeah, so it's a tragic scene for Henry.
Yeah, so basically Henry also, he goes in the witness protection program because Paulie's abandoned him. The Lucchese family's abandoned him. He's lost all his respect, all his ties to the family, to the mob. He's on his own. He's dead broke. He thinks he's going to get killed, and he's got a family to protect.
Yeah. And then it's a heartbreaking scene watching him do that to his friends and his family in court. But like we said, he ends up going to witness protection program, and then it leads to that great ending. But ultimately, obviously, Henry Hill ended up being such a loose cannon that he got out of the witness protection program pretty quickly.
Yeah, and he passed away, I think, in like 2012 or something like that. One of the main themes of this film is guilt, not of crime or sin, but of betrayal and betraying your friends and ratting on your friends. And again, the first time Henry gets pinched, he doesn't say a word, and he's treated like a hero by these mafiosos and his idols. You know, Jimmy grabs him and says that line, "Never rat on your friends, always keep your mouth shut." And again, it's a perfect foreshadow for where everything is gone. He's in desperation, and so he rats on his film, and he has to deal with that guilt for the rest of his life and that betrayal.
100%. A fun fact about this movie is the word "fuck" is used 321 times in this film. And at the moment at that moment in time, it was the film that used that word the most in history, and now it's been beaten by I think like a dozen films. But Joe Pesci says "fuck" half of the times in the movie. It is all improvised. Scorsese draws some criticism from people for his films, especially this one and a film like The Wolf of Wall Street, because they think that he's glorifying this kind of behavior and this kind of lifestyle. But that's not actually what he's doing. What he's doing is he's telling a story. And in order to properly tell a story about gangsters, you have to be real and authentic and show what their lives are like. And so, yeah, oftentimes they're having fun and they're committing crimes and doing horrible things for their own benefit. But that's the only way to be honest about these characters and in order to tell the story properly. But then also, you can't be glorifying this film if they all end up dying or getting arrested and put in prison. So obviously the message is that, like, one of the messages is that if you're a criminal, you're gonna end up being destroyed by the end of your life in some way. So I don't think he glorifies it at all. I think he's just honest.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot in the Tarantino episode where if you don't like violent movies, don't watch violent movies. No one's forcing you to watch a movie. If you don't like a movie about drugs, you don't like a movie about gangsters, don't watch a movie about drugs, don't watch a movie about gangsters. Yes, it's fun to watch, and they're great movies, but also they're tough. They're not made for kids. This is rated R. You should be adult when you watch this movie. Obviously, we weren't always watched it. But again, if it's not for you, just don't watch it. And I don't think you should criticize the art of what he's creating.
And bad things happen to these people eventually, and they always do. I think there's maybe one or two surviving members of the Mafia from the 50s or 60s. They were all killed or arrested.
And besides that, like dealing with the emotional trauma of everything they've gone through, I'm sure they didn't leave very fulfilling lives towards the end of their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And Scorsese's honest in his depiction of that and the self-destructive nature of that world and that lifestyle. So I don't think it's good to say that he's glorifying being a criminal.
All right, I think that's the end of our episode on Goodfellas.
That was fun.
Episode 24 of Raiders of Lost podcast.
This is one of my favorite movies, and I think it's one of the best movies ever made.
Absolutely. I think this is probably my top 10 of movies, my favorite movies of all time. I think it's Scorsese's best movie. I've probably seen this movie more than anything else in the world.
It was the first film from the 1990s to be put into the National Registry for its importance.
Which is a big deal. And Scorsese, probably the best ever. He made the best movie to come out of the 70s with Taxi Driver, made the best movie to come out of the 80s with The Raging Bull, made the best movie to come out of the 90s with Goodfellas, arguably might have made the best movie coming out of the 2000s with Departed.